How did you approach your study of the chimpanzees differently? How did you bring kind of an emotional component to what you were doing in the field?
Well, I never wanted to be a scientist. Girls weren't thinking about scientific careers back then. In fact, they weren't really thinking of careers at all. They were just thinking of getting married and having children, So I was born loving animals. And when I was a child, I spent a long time out in the garden. This is the house where I grew up, watching animals. No television, none of the modern technological gadgets that young people spend so much time on now. And the other way I was learning was books. So there were these two things: immersion in nature, watching the squirrels and the birds and the insects and so on, and books. And I loved books. We had so little money. And during the war, I don't think children's books were even made. But I found a little old secondhand bookshop with a little gnome of a man who ran it. He used to get, loads of books from the house where the people had died or gone away or something. And he didn't really know where anything was. They were just piled up all over the floor in these little dusty alleyways. And I spent hours and hours in that shop, and he didn't mind. I could read books there if I wanted. And so I remember finding Tarzan of the Apes. I was 10 years old. I could just afford it. I used to save up my money, my few pennies of pocket money, in order to try and buy a book. My sister saved them up for sweets, but she didn't have much luck there because sweets were rationed in the war, so you really couldn't buy a lot of sweets. But anyway, we were very different. And so that book, I don't know what the equivalent price would be now. It was 1 shilling and sixpence, which I don't know what that would be now, but I could just afford it. And I took that book up my favorite tree in the garden, just out there, my beech tree, read it from cover to cover, fell passionately in love with that glorious Lord of the Jungle. And of course, he married the wrong Jane. Silly man. I was very jealous. I mean, I knew he wasn't a Tarzan, but that's when my dream began. I would grow up and go to Africa and live with wild animals. But I wanted to be a naturalist. So when I arrived, I simply did the same as I'd done in the garden here on the cliffs above the sea, just waiting, watching, getting to know them, giving them names when I could identify them, describing their behavior, realizing they were different one from another. They had different personalities, just like we do. Learning how intelligent they can be, using and making tools and things like that. And also a great array of emotions, which are similar, maybe identical to some of ours, like happiness, sadness, fear, despair, anger, grief, all of these things. And as I'd never been to college, nobody told me that it wasn't scientific to think of animals like that. Fortunately, I thought of animals as they really are. And it was a shock when my mentor, Louis Leakey, said I had to get a degree. I wouldn't be taken seriously otherwise. There was no time for an undergraduate degree. He'd got me a place in Cambridge University in England to do a PhD in ethology. I didn't even know what ethology was, which is just behavior, but study of behavior. Anyway, it was a shock to be told I'd done everything wrong. You can't talk about chimpanzees with names. You should number them. You can't talk about their personality, their mind, or their emotion. Those are unique to us. In fact, it was taught at that time, and this is the early 60s, that the difference between us and all other animals was one of kind. But fortunately, when I was a child, I had a wonderful teacher. And this was one teacher who wasn't a female in my life. It was my dog, Rusty. And if you share your life in a meaningful way with any animal, dog, cat, bird, rabbit, horse, pig, I don't care, you you know perfectly well that professors were wrong. We're not the only beings with personality, mind, and emotion. And now science is beginning to recognize that. And animals are being labeled more and more often as sentient beings. And the people who fight that are basically those who are doing very unpleasant things to animals, like in a medical research lab or in a factory farm, people who hunt and trap, that sort of thing.